pageant queen, Nedra Paw urging Patsy to follow in the quest for Miss America. She became Miss West Virginia. His sister was Miss West Virginia. They wanted JonBenet from a very early age to be Miss America. Don't you fight that battle, that general distaste?
All the time. The battle is there, but it's so false. Patsy, in the whole time I knew her, never mentioned anything about JonBenet being Miss America. The pageants that she was doing were just fun pageants. You know, we've been through this 5,000 times. People who want to believe that are going to believe it, and the ones who don't just don't. But that child was not an aspiring beauty queen. She was a 6-year-old daughter who did a lot of activities, and one of those activities happened to be beauty pageants. And it's been, you know, totally blown out of proportion and misconstrued and lied about, and it's just not true. And people
All right, you smart, beautifully, stunning, intellectually minded freaks. Today we are talking about a case that has haunted America for decades, the death of JonBenet Ramsey. This case had a ransom note, DNA evidence, and a list of potential suspects, but somehow, nearly 30 years later, there are still no real answers. It just captivates us, you know? So how was a 6-year-old girl lost in her own massive family home without anyone apparently realizing it? And why has no one ever been charged with the crime? The JonBenet Ramsey case isn't just another unsolved mystery. It's become a cultural obsession that has spawned countless documentaries, books, podcasts, and endless internet debates. It's a case that seems to have everything: a wealthy family, a beauty pageant princess, a bizarre ransom note, mysterious DNA evidence, and a cast of characters that reads like something out of a crime novel. But beneath all the media sensationalism and conspiracy theories lies a very real tragedy: the loss of a little girl whose life was cut short in the most unimaginable way. Every part of this case has been picked apart, from the spiral staircase where that bizarre ransom note was found to JonBenet's bedroom. But there's one room deep in the basement that holds more secrets than any other: a small, windowless wine cellar. This is where JonBenet's body was discovered. But the strange layout of this room, the weird clues found inside, and the fact that it is now permanently walled off has fueled some pretty dark theories for decades. What was it about this tiny room that is still the dark heart of this case? What secrets were sealed behind that new wall? To get it, we have to go back. We have to understand the house, the absolute chaos of that first morning, and go down into the basement ourselves, to the place where all the questions began. The wine cellar isn't just a location. It's become a symbol of everything that went wrong with this investigation, everything that remains unexplained, and everything that continues to divide experts and amateur sleuths alike. It's a room that has been photographed, analyzed, and theorized about more than almost any other crime scene in American history. And now it's gone forever, sealed behind a wall like some kind of modern-day tomb. Okay, so to even begin to grasp why the wine cellar is so important, you first have to understand the house itself. And this place wasn't just large, it was a complex, multi-level maze. The Ramseys bought it in 1991 for $500,000 and did a ton of renovations, making it a nearly 7,000 square foot labyrinth that would eventually become the setting for one of America's most perplexing crimes. This size and complexity aren't just random details, they're critical to the whole investigation. The layout, with all its different rooms, multiple ways in and out, and connecting staircases, has fueled endless theories about what happened that night. The house had 3 full floors, plus a basement, multiple entrances, and what can only be described as a confusing floor plan that even regular visitors struggled to navigate. One of the weirdest features was a spiral staircase that went from the 2nd floor, right near JonBenet's room, down to the back of the 1st floor, and it was at the bottom of this staircase that Patsy Ramsey said she found that infamous 2.5-page ransom note. This staircase was basically a hidden route from the top of the house down towards the basement, a detail that becomes incredibly important when you start thinking about how someone could move through the house undetected. The ransom note itself is worth pausing on here. This wasn't some hastily scribbled demand, it was a literary manifesto, 2.5 pages long, written on paper from the Ramsey house, with a pen 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 from the Ramsey house, with a pen. It referenced movies, made specific threats, and demanded exactly $118,000, nearly the exact amount of John Ramsey's recent bonus. Most kidnapping notes are short and to the point. This one read like someone had all the time in the world to craft it. People who knew the house well literally described it as uh, a labyrinth. I mean, guests who had been there multiple times said they didn't even know that spiral staircase existed. This just shows you the house was not some open concept, easy to navigate space. It was full of nooks and crannies and confusing paths, and that confusion played a disastrous role. On the morning JonBenet was reported missing, the basement was a whole other world. It was a mix of finished and unfinished areas, a playroom where JonBenet's brother Burke liked to build with his train set, a boiler room with all the mechanical systems, a laundry area, and a bunch of storage spaces filled with holiday decorations and family belongings. The basement felt like a separate house underneath the main house with its own geography and secrets. Tucked away in the furthest corner, through a narrow hallway that felt almost like an afterthought, was this small 10 by 8 foot room with concrete walls, the wine cellar. To get there, you had to know where you were going. It wasn't a room you'd stumble across by accident. It was a windowless, cramped storage room, and the door didn't have a real lock. It just had this simple wooden latch on the outside, a little block of wood that swiveled on a screw. Think of it like the latch on an old barn door, simple but effective. This latch is one of the first of many, many bizarre details that would drive investigators crazy for decades. In one interview, Patsy Ramsey said she'd flip the latch down just so the kids wouldn't get in there. The room stored some wine, some Christmas decorations, and other household items. Nothing particularly valuable or dangerous, but stuff the parents didn't want little hands getting into. But then in another interview, she was less sure, saying she wouldn't have specifically necessarily locked it. This kind of ambiguity is classic for this case, and it's so frustrating. Who latched it that night? And more importantly, who unlatched it? The house's layout meant any search would be tough. With so many rooms, closets, and hiding places, a thorough search would take hours even with multiple officers. But it was the failure to even properly try to search in those first few hours that let the wine cellar keep its horrible secret for way too long. The story of the wine cellar really kicks off at 5:52 a.m. on December 26, 1996. Patsy Ramsey makes that frantic 911 call, says her daughter is gone, and she found a ransom note. From that exact moment, the investigation, if you can even call it that at first, was a complete mess. If you listen to that 911 call, you can hear the panic in Patsy's voice. She's almost hyperventilating, barely able to get the words out. "We have a kidnapping," she tells the dispatcher. "Hurry, please." But here's what's weird, and this is something that's been analyzed to death. You can hear what sounds like other voices in the background after Patsy thinks she's hung up. Some experts claim they can make out Burke's voice, which contradicts the family's statement that he was asleep the whole time. Police showed up thinking they were dealing with a kidnapping. Officer Rick French was the first on scene at 5:59 a.m., just 7 minutes after the call. And that one assumption, kidnapping, just dictated their entire response and led to a series of mistakes that still haunt this case. French did a quick surface-level search of the house, but fatefully, he didn't open the door to the wine cellar. He later said the latch appeared secure and undisturbed, so he moved on. The focus was on a kidnapper who was long gone, not one who might still be inside. This was the first critical error, but it wouldn't be the last. In a kidnapping, the priority is usually communication, waiting for that ransom call, setting up phone traces, and preserving the ability to negotiate. But in a potential homicide, the priority is securing the scene and conducting a thorough search. The Boulder Police Department treated this like a kidnapping for hours, and that mindset shaped everything that followed. This mistake was made so much worse by the total lack of control over the scene. Instead of sealing off the house and treating it like a potential crime scene, police let the Ramseys' friends and family just pour in. The Whites, the Fernies, the Reverend from their church. By mid-morning, the house was crawling with people who had no business being there. They were walking through the house, using the kitchen, the bathrooms, moving things around, touching surfaces. From a forensic perspective, it was an absolute nightmare. Any potential evidence was being trampled and contaminated by the minute. Detective Linda Arndt arrived around 8 a.m. to take over the scene, but by then, the damage was already done. She was essentially alone, trying to manage what had become a chaotic situation with multiple people coming and going. She later described feeling overwhelmed and outnumbered, and you can understand why. This wasn't how a crime scene was supposed to be handled. So, for hours, the investigation was just stuck in this kidnapping mode. The ransom note said they'd call between 8 and 10 a.m. When 10 a.m. came and went with no call, the note said they'd call later. Everyone was just waiting for a phone call that would never come, while JonBenet's body lay just one floor below. It wasn't until around 1 p.m. that things changed. Before that, though, we have the first and maybe the most mysterious encounter with the wine cellar door. Fleet White, a close family friend and wealthy oil executive, went down into the basement by himself to look for JonBenet around 6:15 that morning. He was one of the first people to arrive after the police, and he was genuinely trying to help. He checked out the various rooms, including a train room where Burke kept his elaborate model train set. It was there that he noticed a broken basement window, a detail that would become hugely important later. The window had been broken for months, according to John Ramsey, who said he'd broken it himself earlier that year when he was locked out of the house. But there was fresh glass on the floor beneath it, and a Samsonite suitcase positioned directly under the window. Was this how an intruder got in, or was it a red herring? Fleet then went to the far end of the basement, down that narrow hallway, to that unassuming white door, the wine cellar. According to his statement, the door was latched with the wooden peg in the down position. He unlatched it, opened the door, and just saw pitch black darkness. He couldn't find a light switch. The switch was actually inside the room, to the right of the door, in a location that wasn't intuitive. He saw nothing, so he closed the door and went back upstairs. This moment is just, it's excruciating. JonBenet's body was almost certainly in that room just a few feet away. Why didn't he see her? Boulder police later did a test and concluded there wasn't enough light to see anything unless your eyes had time to adjust. Time that Fleet, in his panic and urgency, just didn't take. The room was completely black without artificial light, and Fleet was probably only in there for a few seconds before giving up. He was right there at the threshold of the crime's horrible end, but the darkness kept the secret. For over 7 hours, as the house filled with people, as friends brought food and offered comfort, as police waited for phone calls and analyzed handwriting, JonBenet was lying in that cold room, just one floor below everyone. The truth was just waiting in the dark, behind a simple wooden latch that anyone could have opened. By early afternoon, the whole kidnapping theory was falling apart. The promised 10 a.m. phone call from the kidnappers never came. So at about 1 p.m., Detective Linda Arndt pulled John Ramsey and Fleet White aside and asked them to search the house again, from top to bottom, for anything unusual. They started in the basement, they moved through the lower level, and their path eventually led them right back down that same narrow hallway to the same white door, the wine cellar. What happened next is one of those moments that's just seared into true crime history. John Ramsey got to the door, Hold up, because this is where it gets weird. He later said he found the door latched, which contradicted Fleet White's account from that morning. And he also claimed the door was always open. So was it latched, unlatched by Fleet, and then latched again by someone else? It's a tiny detail, but it's one of those things that just makes your brain itch. You know, John unlatched the peg and opened the door. This time, a light was switched on, and the effect was instant and horrific. There on the concrete floor was a small figure wrapped in a white blanket. It was JonBenet. John cried out, rushed forward, removed the duct tape from her mouth, and carried her body upstairs. In that 1 second, the kidnapping story vanished, and the real horror was revealed. But in that same second, the primary crime scene, the wine cellar, was forever compromised. By moving the body, John, in his grief, destroyed the forensic canvas of that room. But even with the scene disrupted, the evidence that police eventually found in and around that room was both perplexing and deeply disturbing. JonBenet had been found with a garrote device made from a nylon cord and a broken paintbrush handle. The other half of that paintbrush was later found in Patsy Ramsey's art supplies. The cord, however, wasn't from the Ramsey house. On the white blanket covering her, investigators found a single foreign pubic hair that didn't belong to any Ramsey. And under her fingernails and on her clothing was more DNA from an unknown male one. This DNA has never been matched to anyone in the family or any criminal database. Near her body, on the floor, was a clear footprint from a high-tech hiking boot. No one in the family owned boots that matched, and on the doorframe of the wine cellar itself, an unidentified palm print was found, which also didn't match any of the Ramseys. This room was a complete paradox. It had evidence pointing towards the family, like the paintbrush, but it also had a ton of evidence pointing away from them: the DNA, the hair, the boot print, the palm print. The wine cellar wasn't just where she was found, it was the origin of the two warring theories that would define this case forever. Okay, this room, it's like a puzzle box where half the clues point one way and the other half point in the complete opposite direction. So let's break it down. First, let's look at the evidence that supports an intruder. The most compelling stuff is physical. You have the broken basement window in the train room nearby. A grate was disturbed and a scuff mark was under the window. This has long been seen as the intruder's way in. But, and there's always a but in this case, investigators noted a perfect spider web in the window grate that was undisturbed, which makes you wonder if anyone actually climbed through. Then you have the high-tech boot print on the wine cellar floor. Police could never link this boot to anyone in the family or any known person connected to the house. It's an orphan clue. Same with the unidentified palm print on the door frame, a ghost print. The DNA evidence is probably the most significant thing pointing to an intruder. The DNA of unknown male 1-inch found on JonBenet seemed like the smoking gun. In 2008, the Boulder DA at the time, Mary Lacey, officially exonerated the Ramseys based on this DNA. However, later analysis has raised questions. Some experts now think the sample might be a mix of DNA from multiple people or just trace contamination from manufacturing. So the smoking gun is a little smokier than we first thought. But taken together, the window, boot print, palm print, and DNA paint a pretty strong picture of an outsider who got into the house and left behind these cryptic clues. But the room also tells a totally different story. The theory of family involvement finds its roots here too. The most damning piece of evidence is the garrote device. Seriously, the broken paintbrush used for the handle came directly from Patsy Ramsey's art kit. The idea that an intruder would break in, not bring their own weapon, and instead wander through the house to find Patsy's art supplies to build one. That just seems so improbable to a lot of investigators. And the ransom note itself, found on the staircase leading down towards the basement, it was written on a notepad from inside the house with a pen from the house. The amount, $118,000, was almost the exact same as a recent bonus John Ramsey got. Handwriting experts have gone back and forth, but several said they couldn't eliminate Patsy as the writer. Why would an intruder spend 20 minutes inside the house writing a super long, personalized note? Proponents of the family theory say they wouldn't. They believe the note was staged to cover up something that happened inside the family. The wine cellar then becomes a mirror. Look at it one way, you see an intruder. Look at it another, you see a staged crime scene. It holds the evidence for both guilt and innocence, which is why this case is still so maddeningly unsolved. So what happened to the house? The Ramseys obviously never spent another night there and sold it in 1998 for $650,000, actually taking a loss on their investment. The address was changed from 755 to 749 15th Street to try and get some privacy, but it didn't really help. The house had become infamous, a tourist attraction for the morbidly curious who would drive by just to stare at the place where JonBenet died. For years, the house sat on the market, struggling to find buyers. Who wants to live in a place where such a tragedy occurred? It's one of those properties that real estate agents call stigmatized. No matter how beautiful or well appointed, the history hangs over it like a dark cloud. The house was eventually bought in 2004 by Carol Schuller Milner and her husband for $1.05 million. Milner was the daughter of televangelist Robert Schuller, and she said they wanted to breathe new life into the house and heal the space. They understood the weight of what they were taking on, but they believed they could transform the property into something positive again. They did huge renovations, essentially gutting and rebuilding large portions of the interior. The dark, creepy basement with its maze of rooms was turned into a more open family room with modern lighting and finishes. They tried to erase the physical reminders of that terrible night, creating a space that felt completely different from the crime scene photos that had been plastered across every newspaper and website in America. But they did something else, something permanent. The small, windowless part of the basement, the wine cellar, the exact spot where John Ramsey found his daughter, was walled off. It was sealed, its entrance erased, making the room completely inaccessible. They didn't just renovate it or repurpose it, they eliminated it entirely from the house's floor plan. The reasons aren't public, and the Milners have never spoken extensively about their decision, but you can guess it was an act of compassion by the new owners, a way to physically and symbolically close a chapter of just unimaginable horror. I totally get it. If you're trying to make a home there, you want to literally seal that pain away. Some spaces are just too heavy with tragedy to ever be anything else. The renovation was extensive and expensive, reportedly costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. But no amount of money could change what happened there, and no amount of renovation could erase the memories. The decision to wall off the wine cellar was probably the most practical thing they could do, make it so that rooms simply ceased to exist. And yet, in a case built on secrets and suspicion, the act of walling off the most crucial room just feels unsettling. For people who believe an intruder did it, it's just a sad final detail, the burial of a crime scene that had already given up all its secrets. But for those who think there's more to the story, it can feel like the ultimate cover-up, a literal entombment of whatever secrets are left. Some conspiracy theorists have suggested that evidence was hidden in that room, that there were clues that powerful people didn't want discovered. Of course, there's no real basis for these claims. The room was thoroughly processed by investigators, photographed extensively, and every piece of evidence was cataloged. But in a case where so many questions remain unanswered, even the most rational decisions can take on sinister overtones. The room is a ghost space in the house now. No one can walk in it, no one can see where the boot print was, no one can stand where John Ramsey stood when he made that horrible discovery. The room that was the dark heart of this whole thing is now just a blank wall. It's been silenced, but the theories it created are louder than ever, fueled by the knowledge that the truth is now forever sealed away. In some ways, walling off the wine cellar was the perfect ending to the JonBenet Ramsey story. A case built on closed doors, hidden secrets, and unanswered questions concluded with the most important room being permanently closed off. It's poetic in a dark way. The place where the mystery began is now a place that no one can ever enter again. So, what do you guys think? I really want to know what you, my smart, beautifully, stunning, intellectually minded freaks, think is the most significant piece of evidence from that room. Is it the DNA that pointed to an unknown male, the paintbrush that came from Patsy's art supplies, that weird high-tech boot print that has never been matched to anyone, the mysterious palm print on the door frame, or is it something else entirely? Maybe the simple fact that the room was so hidden that even regular visitors to the house didn't know it existed. Drop all your theories in the comments below. And I mean all of them. This case has generated more theories than almost any other unsolved crime in American history. Some people think it was a botched kidnapping by an outsider who panicked when things went wrong. Others believe it was someone the family knew, someone who understood the layout of the house and had access to personal information about John's bonus. Still others think the answer lies somewhere in between. Maybe an intruder who had been watching the family, who knew their routines in their home. Honestly, the conversation around this case is what keeps the hope for answers alive. Every new perspective, every fresh analysis of the evidence, every connection that someone makes in the comments, it all matters. Because somewhere in all these discussions, in all this collective thinking, might be the insight that finally breaks this case open. The technology keeps advancing too. DNA analysis techniques that didn't exist in 1996 are now standard practice. Genetic genealogy, the same technology that caught the Golden State Killer, could potentially identify unknown male 1 if his DNA is ever matched to a distant relative who submitted their DNA to one of those ancestry websites. Touch DNA analysis has become more sophisticated, potentially allowing investigators to get DNA profiles from smaller and older samples. But here's the thing that haunts me about this case. What if the answer was always hiding in plain sight? What if the wine cellar, with all its contradictory evidence, actually tells a coherent story that we just haven't been able to see yet? What if the key to understanding what happened is something simple that we've been overlooking while focusing on the more dramatic elements? That sealed wine cellar is the perfect metaphor for the JonBenet Ramsey case itself. It's this dark, inaccessible space that we can all speculate about, but we can never, ever truly re-enter. We have the reports and the photos and the conflicting stories, but we can never go back to that room on that day. We can never see exactly what John Ramsey saw when he opened that door. We can never experience the scene the way the first investigators did before it was contaminated and altered. The evidence found there points to a stranger and to the family at the same time, creating this perfect storm of reasonable doubt that has protected the person responsible for decades. Every piece of evidence seems to have a counter-explanation. Every theory has a plausible alternative. Every conclusion can be challenged with different facts from the same case. Walling off the room might have been an act of healing for the house, but for the case, it feels like a final, frustrating barrier. It reminds us that while the house has moved on, while new families have created new memories in those spaces, the search for justice for JonBenet has not. The secret of what really happened in that small windowless room remains locked away, not just by time and contaminated evidence, but now by concrete and plaster. And we're all left on the outside, still searching for a key that might not even exist anymore. The wine cellar is gone, but the questions it raised will persist until someone confesses, until new evidence emerges, until DNA technology advances enough to provide definitive answers. We'll keep coming back to that room in our minds. We'll keep wondering what secrets it held, what clues we might have missed, what truth was buried along with JonBenet. If you are interested in deep dives into complex cases like this one, cases that challenge our assumptions and force us to grapple with uncomfortable possibilities, consider subscribing to the channel. We don't just tell stories here. We dig into the evidence, we examine the inconsistencies, and we ask the hard questions that others might shy away from. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being part of this ongoing search for answers.